Hello, I'm going to talk about my favourite films from the past 10 years because the decade ended and I've not really got anything better to do. So these are my top 10 favourite films from the past 10 years. Starting off with 2010, here are the honourable mentions that are good films that I really like, but they're not my favourite films for some reason or another. Scott Pilgrim is on here, not because it's not my favourite film, I think it's the best film of this year that's on this list, but I want to talk about a different one, which is Wild Target. The reason I want to talk about Wild Target is that it's not like most of the other films I saw this year or the films that I was watching at this time of my life. This is a smaller film, it's a little British film with Emily Blunt, Bill Nighy and Rupert Grint, and it's just really nice. It's funny in a way that American films aren't really, it's just nice. It's a nice little film that I enjoy going back to every now and then. I definitely recommend it, but it's not amazing. It's not one of the best films of the decade. It's just one of my favorites. That's something I should mention, by the way. These aren't the best films of the past 10 years. These are just the films that have stuck with me for some reason or another that are my favorite films, my top 10. They're not gonna be all good films. They're not gonna be the best films of all time. They're not Oscar winners, necessarily. I just like them. But yeah, Wild Target, it's like a spy film, but very British. And I don't mean like James Bond, I mean actually just very British. It's just silly and fun in the way that only really British films tend to be. I would definitely recommend watching it. It's one of my favorite films. When I saw it, it surprised me and it stuck with me until right now. 2011 was a strange year for films. There's a lot of different films that kind of made the cut for this, but the one I want to talk about is Attack the Block, because that kind of changed everything for me in terms of films that I enjoyed watching. Up until this point, I was really into like Edgar Wright films, and this is Joe Cornish, so it's a similar vein. This is the first thing that I saw John Boyega in, and it's actually amazing. It's a low-budget film, but it doesn't feel like a low-budget film. It's aliens invading a council estate in London, but it's not the kind of crappy spoof that you'd expect it to be. It's really, really solid. The aliens in it are so unique, and the concept behind them is just fun, and they're brought to life really, really well. In terms of comedy, it had a lot of competition, what with Paul, Bridesmaids, Friends with Benefits, and The Muppets, but it still kind of comes out on top for me because it's just funnier. Not in a more jokes per second kind of way, but the jokes that they make are really funny, and it comes from just the characters being the characters that they are. It's a kind of film that you haven't really seen before. No one else has decided to take boys from a council estate and pit them against aliens that are horribly difficult to kill. It's still a concept that I've not even seen remotely touched to this day, and even if another film did come out that did the same thing, I don't think it could do it better than Attack the Block did. And with 2011 over, we move on to 2012. At this point, there is a massive shift in the kind of films that I'm watching, and I can show you all the honorable mentions here, but in reality, we know which one is going to be my favorite one of this year. It's The Avengers. The Avengers comes out in 2012, and that actually changed my life a little bit. I went to see it 5 times in the cinema. I paid to see that 5 times. I had never done that before, and I'd never do it again until another Avengers film came out. This film, for me, was incredible. I watched it again and again and again. I had never seen anything like it before. I'd always kind of loved superheroes, and I liked pretty much every single superhero film that had come out to that point, despite the fact of them not being very good. But this changed the game. Marvel at this point said, okay, we're gonna bring all of your favorite superheroes together, and that's gonna be it. They're all gonna be living together like they do in the comics. And no one else had done that before. You know, you had the Fantastic Four, who were separate from the X-Men, who were separate from Spider-Man. All of them lived in their own little individual universes. Even the Superman and Batman films, they didn't really cross over at all. It was a complete change to what superhero films were, and it set the standard going forward. Marvel just took over the entire genre and said, this is ours now, this is how you do it. And The Avengers is kind of at the center of that. That was the turning point for me that made me really, really get into Marvel. At this point, it's not my favorite Marvel film or even my favorite Avengers film, but because of the time that I watched it and that kind of first viewing, it stuck with me so much. It's up there as one of my top films. 2012 is over and 2013 rolls in, and at this point I'm in love with every single Marvel film that comes out. Iron Man 3 was a massive, massive film for me, but I'm going to talk about Begin Again because that is a film that just sticks in my heart in a way that other films don't. I saw the advert and I instantly knew that I wanted to see it, and only one of my friends was there and wanted to see it with me because it was summer and pretty much everyone was away doing something. So I went with this one friend, and this film was kind of like our film together because we went to see it together and we both loved it, and it's just stuck with me since then. If you've not seen it, it's basically Keira Knightley and Mark Ruffalo recording an album together on the streets of New York just after both of their lives have kind of fallen apart. And it's so good. There's a lot of original music in it, and the music is actually pretty good, but probably the best thing is just the relationship between Keira Knightley and Mark Ruffalo. And when I say relationship, I mean friendship, obviously, but those actors are both so charismatic and likable, and just seeing them interact together is just, it's great. I love this film so much. At this point I was in school and I was doing drama, and we had to make our own devised piece where we kind of wrote it and directed it and showed it off to the rest of the class. Now, I essentially decided to lift all of the music from Begin Again and make a narrative around that. It still sticks out to me every single time I hear one of the songs come on. It's just a really nice, heartwarming film that's a little bit bittersweet at times, and I just love it. 2014, there were a lot of good films this year, like quite a few that were on the list. I find it difficult to pick one, but the one I'm going to choose is Birdman, because it was kind of at that point that I started watching more Oscar films that were like, you know, nominated for Oscars and winning Oscars. That year was kind of the year that I started taking more notice of them and watching films that were good films and not just enjoyable. Birdman also has Emma Stone in it, and she's my favourite actress of all time. I've had a crush on her since I was 11, so that's one good thing about it. It's Michael Keaton playing a role that is basically made for him, and it's shot as though it's one take, which makes it feel like you're watching a play, and honestly, I could talk about this film for days. I love Birdman. 2015 is kind of a dead zone for films for me. I was in school, I was moving to university, and I had exams, and obviously trying to get into uni life was difficult. So I didn't really watch many films that came out in 2015. I've only got 5. Not all of them are even very good, but the one film that I watched in university, and I can actually remember watching it right now, is Fury Road. I remember sitting in my tiny box room in halls with this TV watching it. I'd never seen a Mad Max film before, and this was just amazing. I used to kind of like action films when I was younger, but I'd kind of lost my taste for them as I'd grown up. And this film just kind of reignited my love for action because it was really, really good action. If you turn off the sound, you can still watch this film and pretty much get all of it because the visual storytelling is so good. It's just a film that is so much more than it ever needed to be. And this is one of those films that kind of start me down the path to appreciating films for different reasons than I did before. On to the second half of the decade. This was the point where I'd first moved out and I was paying rent in a house by myself for the first time, and I was in my second year of uni and my life was kind of in a weird point. I hadn't really seen many films this year, but the ones that I did see I really loved. Here are the honorable mentions, but my favorite film was La La Land. When I saw this film, I went to see it at the very next showing, straight away, and I've watched it probably 5 or 6 more times after that, and every single time I love it just as much as I did the first time. I can't really explain why I've got such strong feelings about it. Obviously Emma Stone is in it and I love everything she does, but this film made me kind of love Ryan Gosling as an actor as well. I love everything about this film. I love the story, I love the characters and how they interact, and I love the relationship between them and how it ends up breaking down in a way that you don't expect. I love the music of it, I like the choreography, I like literally everything about this film. It kind of frames a fairly realistic relationship through the lens of old movies. And it's also a musical. If you don't like musicals, watch this. 2017, I just started my last year of uni and we had a pretty big loss in my family that shook everyone's foundations. And then I went and saw Coco. And after watching it, I started crying. And when I say crying, I mean sobbing. I'd never had this kind of emotional reaction to a film before. And I physically could not stop myself from crying, to the point where I started laughing through the tears because it was so absurd that I was unable to stop. This film affected me in a way that no other film has ever affected me, and for that it's got to be on this list. It's my favourite film of 2017 because I've never felt anything like that from a film before. Pixar always make good films, and I think in the year leading up to this they did exactly that. They made just good films, but Coco was kind of better. At its core, the film is really about family, and it tells its story so well. And honestly, I don't think anyone could watch this film and not feel something. Coco isn't a film that I've seen a lot of times like the other films on this list, but that's because when I saw it, it was the exact point of my life where I needed to see that film. And I only really needed to see it once. This film reminds me of that time of my life, and that's kind of what films do, sometimes. This was a film that really spoke to me at a particular point in my life, a point in my life that I'm not in anymore. So if I was to go back and watch it again now, I would still feel something watching it, but I don't think I would feel remotely the same. 2018, and I was finishing uni and I'd started watching films again. Thank God. There were a lot of films that came out this year that I enjoyed, but obviously the only one that I'm going to choose is Spider-Verse because it was incredible. I haven't seen another animated film remotely like this. It just goes to show you that if you put people that love something to work on it, you will get something great out of it. Sony have been getting worse and worse and worse at making Spider-Man films. Say what you want, the Tobey Maguire films aren't actually that great. Most of the people that say they are stuck in nostalgia. They were good for the time, but they're not good now. He's a nearly 30-year-old man that's playing a teenager who nobody likes. This is the first thing that they did, completely separate to Disney and Marvel, that was actually really good. This film said that anyone could be Spider-Man, anyone could be a superhero, which sounds like schmaltzy and, you know, kind of sappy, but it's a really good message that kids need to hear nowadays. It's a film that I never thought would actually get made, and then it happened. That's what I love about the past few years of films based on books and comics and things like that, that you can just do anything you want. And the final year of the decade, 2019, was a massive year for films for me. I started going to the cinema so often. So I've seen so many great films that came out. I really struggled to pick just one that I was going to talk about. These are all of the honorable mentions, and I could talk for days about literally all of them. Endgame obviously was the culmination to what started for me in 2012 with the Avengers. Detective Pikachu fulfilled my lifelong dream of seeing real Pokemon. It was something I didn't think could happen. I never thought that they would do it, and then I got to see that. In my lifetime, I got to see live-action Pokemon. I didn't think that I liked horror films until I watched Us. It just shocked me how great this film was. Booksmart was hilarious. Alita Battle Angel was fantastic for the weirdest reasons. And Little Women is such a nice, cozy film to watch. It's like a hug from your family. I loved Little Women, and I didn't think that I would. Marriage Story made me realize that I really liked Adam Driver as an actor, and to me it's kind of like La La Land, but less heightened and grounded more in reality. The film I'm going to talk about though is Knives Out, because wow, Knives Out. As soon as I saw it, I wanted to watch it again. I haven't seen a whodunit like this ever. I love mysteries and I love figuring films out, and this film lays down all of the groundwork and it pays it off exceptionally well. The only other director that I've seen do anything remotely similar to this is Edgar Wright in terms of setup and payoff. The film is absolutely fantastic, and if you've not seen it, you need to. It is incredible. All of the actors in it are hilarious when they need to be and perfect for the roles. There's not a single performance that I was like, could be better on. Every single one was great. It was funny, it was tense, it hit every mark that it needed to, and I really want to see a sequel. Honestly, this is a great film, and if you haven't seen it, you need to, because it will change what you think a mystery film can be. I'm calling it now. Rian Johnson needs to direct the next live-action Scooby-Doo film. He will make it great. So these are my favorite films of the past 10 years. Like I said, not the best films, but they are my favorite films. What are your favorite films of the past 10 years, or even the past year? Let me know in the comments, and I will see you at some point in the future.